Hello, welcome to TypeScript Basics. In this part, we are going to look at types and variables. Type in any programming language is the classification of unit of data. You specify this classification so compiler knows how you are intending to use that data. Getting the type correct is very important. For example, assume that you are writing a program to capture name and age of the student present in a class and you want to find the average age of the students. Unless you capture the age as number, it's not going to be easy for you to complete this work because you can't apply the formula for calculating average on string values. At a very basic level, TypeScript has three simple types. First one is number. Number is used to classify data as number. This includes integer and float of different sizes. In TypeScript, you just have one type for all types of numbers. The second one is string. String is one or more characters enclosed by single quote, double quote, or backticks. The third one is boolean. Boolean is to indicate true or false value. There are some special types in TypeScript. For example, any, void, or never, or some of the special types. Any is used when you want a type that can accept any value. You use this type when you deal with the external data source and you don't know what type of data you will get until runtime. Your program will be ready to accept any type of data if you use any as a type. The other scenario is when you are migrating from JavaScript to TypeScript. Because JavaScript is dynamic language, you'll often find variable assigned with different types of data. Converting those variables to this special type called any in TypeScript makes this migration easier without making any invasive changes. Other than these scenarios, it is generally discouraged to use this type any. This is because when you use any as a type, you won't get the benefit of working with strongly typed language. The next special type is void. Void is a keyword used to indicate absence of data, generally used as a function's return type. You use this to indicate that the function returns no value. The third one we have here is never. Never basically indicates that it's never going to happen. For example, if you have a function with never as a return type, then you are informing the compiler that the function is never going to return. The difference between void and never is that the function with void as a return type will return, but it won't return any value, whereas a function with never as a return type indicates that the function is never going to return. That is, the control of the execution is never going to come out gracefully. It will all make sense when we see some examples. TypeScript also supports complex types. Complex types are used to define structure or shape of the thing or concept. For example, in the student example we have seen previously, student is a complex type. We use two simple unit of data, age and name, grouped in a particular way to represent real-world thing called student. There are many complex type constructs available in TypeScript like array, class, tuple, and etc. We are not going to cover any complex types as part of this video, but we will cover each complex types in more detail in future videos. TypeScript is a strongly typed language. With a strongly typed language, your compiler will stop you from doing anything that is illegal. For example, you can't assign a string value to a number type, or you can't invoke a method on a type where that method doesn't exist. All these happens at compile time rather than runtime. If you get these errors during runtime, then it is a disaster because it could be happening in production environment. With TypeScript being strongly typed language, you catch these errors during compile time and fix them long before your code reaches production. Tooling support is another benefit of strongly typed language. You get help from code editor, for example IntelliSense, while writing the code, because code editor will be able to understand what you are trying to do with the help of compiler, and it offers help. Any data can be referred in one of three forms. They are literal value, variables, and constants. You can directly use values in your program, or you can also use variables or constants. Let's see what is variable and constant next. Variable is reference to a piece of data that can change during the execution of your program. You generally create a variable using let or var keyword and then variable name, and then you optionally specify data type, and you can optionally specify value as well. You must end variable declaration with semicolon. Constant is reference to piece of data that cannot change during the execution of your program. You create constant using const keyword, then constant name. You can optionally specify type of the constant that you are creating, and you must assign value to constant, then you end it with semicolon. I know it is a lot to take. Let's see some example and digest all of the things that we have seen now. I have VS Code open here and my main.ts file has nothing in it. I'm going to create a new variable called count. To create variable, we need to use let or var keyword. I will explain the difference between let and var when we discuss functions, but for now I'm going to use let keyword. I'm going to say let count is equal to 10 and then I end it with semicolon. Here I have created a number variable and assigned a value 10. I haven't specified the data type explicitly, but TypeScript is smart enough to infer that it is a number variable based on the value we have assigned. If I hover over this variable called count, my code editor, which is VS Code, will tell me the actual type of this variable. As you can see, TypeScript is informing VS Code that this is a number type. You can also explicitly specify the type, but that's not necessary. So if I specify the type explicitly, it's still going to be number, but because TypeScript is good enough in inferring the type based on the value we assign, it is not necessary to specify the type explicitly. So I'm not going to specify the type in this case, but you do need to specify a type when you don't have the value assigned. Let's say I'm going to create another variable and I'm not going to assign any value to it. Later, I'm going to assign value to this variable, which is going to be say 20. Even though we have assigned a number to this variable, the type of this variable is going to be any, as you can see here. This is because at the time of declaration, we haven't specified the type for this variable. So TypeScript assumed that this is a variable of type any. Because of that, it allowed you to assign this number value to this variable. You can also assign other type of values. For example, I'm going to say another count is 20. So in this case, I have assigned a string value to the same variable. This is possible because TypeScript has inferred that the type of this variable called another code as any. If I explicitly specify the type here as number, then my first assignment will be valid, but the second assignment will be invalid because we have explicitly told TypeScript compiler that this variable called another code is of type number. So it allows you to assign a number value, but it doesn't allow you to assign string value. Let's look at some example for strings. I'm going to create a string called color is equal to, I'm going to use double quotes in this case. I'm going to call this color as red. So if I hover over this, TypeScript compiler shows me that this is of type string. I can also replace these double quotes with single quotes and it will still be inferred as string. I can also replace these single quotes with backtick. Backticks are also valid for creating a string. As you can see here, this is also inferred as string. The good thing is when you use one of these three things for creating a string, you can use the other two symbols within a string. For example, in this case, I have used backtick to create my string. So I can put either double quote or single quote within my string and my string will still be a valid string. So I'm going to call this red within quotes. This is still a valid string variable, but the value of this variable is red within double quotes, and I can also use single quotes here. Similarly, if I use double quote to create my string, I can put backtick or single quote within my string value and those are valid. And same is true when we use single quote to create my string. Let's look at constants now. To create constant, we need to use const keyword, and it is a convention to use uppercase for constant. So I'm going to say color and the color is going to be red. And if I hover over this, it has created a constant called color and its value is red. Because constant value cannot change, it is showing the type itself as the value. This is because though red is a string value, because that value is never going to change. But if I explicitly specify my type, say string, then it's going to show string as my type and red as a value. If I try to change this value, then my compiler won't let me do it. So if I try to assign green, my compiler is going to tell me that I'm doing something stupid. So that's constants. Let's look at void keyword now. So I'm going to create a function. I know I haven't covered functions yet actually, but bear with me, I'm going to write a very simple function which is going to print something on the screen. To create function, you need to use function keyword. I'm going to call this function as prettyprint, and it is going to take a parameter of type string, and this function is not going to return anything, so I'm going to specify the return type as void, and within this function I'm going to say console.log value. This is my function now. If I hover over this function, I can see that this is a function which takes a parameter called value, which is of type string, and the return type of this function is void, which means it's not going to return any value to the caller. If I try to return something, say if I put return, then it is fine because I'm just returning from this function, but I'm not returning any value to the caller. If I change this return to return some value, for example, an empty string, then my compiler is going to say that it is not possible to return a value from a function which has return type specified as void. So that's how it works. Let's look at an example for never. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change just the return type of this function to never. So what I'm saying now is this function is not supposed to return at all, but because I have this return keyword, it basically says that undefined is not assignable to type never, because if you just return from this function, the default value will be undefined, but we have specified that this function is never going to return. So compiler finds this information conflicting, it complains. If I remove this return keyword, it's going to complain that this function has code flow that can be successfully completed, so the control will return back to the caller, which cannot happen when you specify the return type as never. That's what it is saying. If I throw an error from here, for example, so I'm going to say throw new error, and if I remove this, then when we call this function, it's not going to return anything. It's not going to complete gracefully. All it is going to do is it is going to throw this error and it's going to stop there, which is okay when we specify the return type as never. Don't worry too much about this type called never because we rarely use this. So that's it for now. I'll see you in the next video.